Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in Australia, Queensland, Northern Territory, Western Australia. We are looking at market research and how to do your own market research. I'm Dante St James. I'll be taking you through this particular session. I better show you who I am before I get going. Have a few familiar faces I can see in there today. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please remember to like, share, smash that subscribe button. We've got tons of these videos available on YouTube through Business Station's channel and my own Dante St James channel as well. So without further ado, let's get it underway and learn a little bit more about how marketing research works. So marketing research is that process by which we do a bit of work beforehand to make sure that our business or our ideas or our changes to our business make sense to the market that we're about to deliver it to. A quote here from W. Edwards Deming, who's an American statistician, author, lecturer, management consultant. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. Know what they say about opinions? They're like backsides. I've got one, you've got one, but we don't want to see each other's, hey? That's how opinions work. Who this particular one is for someone who's wanting to start a brand new business, someone wanting to make a change to their business, someone wanting to work out if their business is either going to be a good idea or still a good idea after they've started it. And of course, you curious cats who just want to find out how to spy on your competitors and learn a bit more about your market and marketplace. What we're going to look at today is why market research is a thing you should be doing, or at least considering doing. Looking at the Australian Bureau of Statistics and using those stats to better understand what the demographics and I guess the qualities and the numbers are for the particular area or market you're looking at within Australia. Facebook Audience Insights and the LinkedIn marketing platform can give us in a little bit more that's out there than just those things that we find out within Australia. In fact, if you're looking to export something to Indonesia, for instance, and selling it in another country, you could do a bit of research there to get an idea of the levels of people who have the interests in things like you're selling. And then finally, Google's keyword planner and their trends will tell us a lot more about what's going on there in the bigger world when it comes to what people are actually searching for and what the trends are around what that particular thing is that you're looking to research. So why should we use market research? Quite simply, data helps us understand our customers. It understands us to answer those questions such as, who's going to buy this product that I'm going to put together? Who is the ideal customer that I'm looking to get to? Who is the persona or the customer avatar, that pretend customer that represents the very real customer that's out there? And how often does that person going to buy? What do they need? What do they want? What do they expect? All those kind of questions are all vital when it comes to working out what to do in your business, whether that's starting a new one or making changes to existing one. Market research is also a very clever way of understanding who your competitors are, especially when it comes to competitors in a market you're wanting to move into, and a little bit about competitors who might be coming into your market as well. If you catch wind of people coming into your particular market, this can be a very valuable way of learning a bit more about the markets they've been in, so you can understand the strategies that they've been able to get them to this point where they're growing. And data these days is largely free for you to be able to access. The digital platforms like Facebook and Google, they give you a lot of free information to help you to use their platforms, particularly the advertising side of their platforms. Now, whilst you can't find out the name, match a name of a person with all of their attributes, that would be a gross, massive problem with privacy. What it does allow you to do, though, is to look at aggregated data, which then says in a population of Sydney, in a population of Brisbane, in a population of Geraldton, in a population of Port Hedland, this is what we can draw conclusions about within that population area. Or it could be within a gender, or within a job role, or within an industry, depending on where you're getting that information from. Now, some sources of good data that we're going to look at is obviously the Australian Bureau of Statistics, probably I'd say gold standard when it comes to the kind of stuff you're going to get from Australian issues. So, such as unemployment, economic results, economic growth, interstate migration, the growth and the changes of demographics within specific regions. Google Ads then gives us data that's more about what people are searching for. So you can say, if I'm in, let's just say, Ballarat in Victoria, I can see what people in Ballarat in Victoria are searching for around a specific subject. So let's just say that the topic is coronavirus. If they're looking for information on coronavirus, what are they specifically typing into Google to get those results out? What are the words they're doing in there? Or let's go something perhaps a little less topical, a little less controversial. And let's say they're searching for information on the Collingwood Football Club. Now, if they're searching for that, how do they search for it? Do they search for Collingwood, Collingwood Football Club, Collingwood Magpies, Magpies Info, Magpies Fan Club, Collingwood Fan Club? What are all the different combinations, those keywords they may be looking for? And when it comes to Facebook, and particularly their business platform, Facebook for Business, you can find out a lot of things through what they call their audience insights. The audience insights allow you to make an audience of your own based upon core information such as age, gender, geographical location, the very easy stuff to pick out, and then see under different interests, behaviors, and also job types and education, what are the things that are very common amongst those people. It's actually a really eye-opening experience to look in there because it gives you a lot of extra information that you may not have had. And then finally, LinkedIn's marketing solutions, which is their ads platform as well, gives you a lot of tools that allow you to narrow down a search to particular job roles, industries, yes, geographical areas as well, but it can get very, very specific and give you some information about how many surgeons are located in the Gold Coast in Queensland. And you can actually get that kind of idea where it pulls out what it's got on the system, then sort of does a bit of AI extrapolation to go, look, we get about maybe half of all surgeons really participate on our platform. So let's just say we get 23, there's actually probably about 46. So that gives you good estimations of the kind of people who are in job roles or in industries or within specific companies. So you can do some research and say, for instance, you want to look at a competitor who's operating in Rockhampton, then you can look up that competitor, how many of their staff are in Rockhampton, and go, okay, I've got a pretty good idea. They've got a very large presence in Rocky. I know that I'm up against a bigger player than what I thought I might have been. So when it comes to information from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, they've had a very big change to their website in this past year. So it's a little bit, not more difficult, it's just a little bit more a roundabout that you go about getting their data. But it's still free and it's still open. And they've done some great reports and aggregations of general trends and general information that's come from the public. Now, 2021 is a census year. It's supposed to be last year. They've actually pushed it out this year for obvious reasons. And that's going to be the year in which we actually get more information from the ABS. So as that information rolls in over 2021, 22, we start to get renewed information about the changes to the demography of Australia, the changes to industries in Australia, job roles, the way there's probably going to be some interesting stories about there, how much interstate migration there's been. Living in Darwin in the Northern Territory, I've noticed that we've had a lot of people move here from interstate. That's really changed. Like we had a declining population. Our population is now growing again. We had a declining real estate market. Our real estate market is going ballistic right now. If you are a real estate agent, you can't sell a house in places like Brisbane, Gold Coast, Darwin, Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, then you're probably not working hard enough, really. So the information you want to find in the ABS or Australian Bureau of Statistics is around things like location. So you can find out information about the demographics, which is the kinds of people that are there. Look at retail trade figures and the kind of things that people buy there. We can look at employment levels, income or the average income for that particular place, education levels, culture, tourism, migration, language usage, all that kind of thing can be there. When you're going into a market, say for instance, you want to start up a new Indian restaurant, this can be a really good way of saying, well, am I making an Indian restaurant for Aussies? or am I making an Indian restaurant for Indian people to be eating at? So you say there's a high proportion of Indians in there and they're from Southern India, then you're able to actually go, well, then opening a restaurant with dosa and dal and all that sort of Southern Indian food is probably more sensible than butter chicken and lamb korma, for instance. Business, that's when you're looking at industry insights. So looking at specific reports and specific insights into trends within just particular industries. You're looking at trade figures, what's imports and exports, pricing indices, which is, the consumer price index, which a lot of government employees get bonuses based upon or pay rises based upon. Could be if there's a 2% price index, they get a 2% pay rise, right? Industry overview, so you can look at a specific industry and see how that specific industry is doing at the moment. So you might be interested in coal, for instance, because you're looking to go into towns like Moranbah in Queensland or Claremont, which are both very heavily focused on the coal extraction industry. So you want to go, well, if there's really, really strong coal at the moment, then these are places they might want to open a new store. Or if they're not going so great, probably not the best place to open up a new store right now. And you can, of course, look at your market where you can pick out specific data for the market that you're operating in now. Or like we're talking about with the coal towns, you can look at other markets and see what the state of those markets are. We pulled out some really good, last time I did this particular webinar, we pulled out some great insights about a couple of towns in Southwest WA, where we can look at, okay, is this a good place to open this specific kind of business? And as we came to that, we went, actually, it's not looking that great, but 2 suburbs over, there's a great place where you might want to consider, simply because people who live there were looking, are of a demographic nature that would fit that kind of business. So how will we then apply this data? Let's look at Tuan, who's, say, 28 years old, a Gold Coast food truck owner. Tuan is asking the question now, should he expand his business to a physical restaurant on the Gold Coast? So he's already got his food truck that he goes through markets and to special occasions. And he's thinking people respond really well to his Vietnamese homemade cooking. So he's like, well, I'm now thinking I should open up a full-time restaurant somewhere physically on the Gold Coast itself. So he may look for demographic information such as people with a higher disposable income to have higher levels of takeaway food beyond the Maccas, the Pizza Huts, the Domino's, the KFCs, and the Hungry Jacks, for instance. So he'll look for a higher demographic. He may look for perhaps a younger demographic who's more willing to try those kinds of foods, other than some older people may not see that as a viable food option for them, may not be quite as adventurous in their palate. He might also look to there, see if there is even a Vietnamese background to that particular part of where he's going. So if he goes to, say, Miami on the Gold Coast, can he also rely on there being enough people of a Vietnamese background that may actually be a secondary customer to him, apart from Aussies wanting to try accessible Vietnamese style food? The Caroline is a 35-year-old Darwin fashion designer, and she's asking if it's the right time to start expanding her online store to a physical store in Darwin. So she was thinking, well, if commercial rents are coming down in Darwin, because then generally retail and retail fashion particularly is taking a massive dive at the moment. So the instant answer you'd think is, given that, probably not a great time for her to start thinking about doing things like opening up a store, right? But the difference is that she may have a very specialty item that might translate quite well to having a physical store that she can operate out of, to not just use as a store, but a place to be able to facilitate the packaging and the sending out of her product for her online store as well. So sometimes it's not about the shop front being accessible to the local public, it's about using it as a base of operations for other things. So she may use the data from the ABS to decide whether there is a market for the kind of people who she would see herself serving as customers. And then final example is Ambrose, 42-year-old in Perth. He's a business development manager in construction. He wants to find out if businesses and corporations are investing in buildings and infrastructure. And this can be found by looking for major projects, the kind of economic activities that's happening in that particular region. So if he's looking at a place like, let's say, for instance, Alice Springs, where there's not a lot of commercial construction going on right now, but there's a couple of big projects happening with new mining operations happening out in the Tanami Desert, that might be something that he look at and go, okay, I could do some serious commercial infrastructure projects there but they will be out of town. So I might look at in town, but if I notice that there is big projects happening outside of town, there's a very good chance then there might be a need for additional office spaces in town that service those outer regions. So when you look at that, you think, well, actually, maybe there is a spot for that. If there's data I can get out of the ABS that supports that, then you can make far better decisions and far more informed decisions about the kinds of things you want to do and the kinds of moves your business might want to make. So the information from Google Ads would be, well, actually, you know what? Let's take a break and pop into the actual interface for the ABS. So we'll go to their website. I'll just bring it up on another screen so we can see what we're doing. So we go abs.gov.au and we'll have a look at where you might find some of this information and where it's going to take us along to. So I'll just reshare the screen now and we're off and racing. So at the front page of the Australian Bureau of Statistics, we can see some general aggregated data. So some stuff like saying that we're, in the upper half of the 25 million now. So population is growing. The consumer price index of 0.9% means that prices have not gone up very much. Our gross domestic product is 3.3% up, which is great to hear. And the average weekly earnings for an Australian is $1,713.90 per week. I tell you now, that's not what I'm making. And the unemployment rate is 6.6, which is significantly down on where it was in the middle of COVID-19. What it can then do is then start to have specific reports that they've released about retail trade in Australia, building approvals data. This could be important to Ambrose, who was looking at some of the data that's to do with his particular industry. Then you're moving on to things like recorded crime and offenders, or changes to new capital expenditure data files. Now, with this particular stuff going on, you're then able to start to look at things like the census and its data. You can find census data. And look, actually, that tells you there that the 2021 data they're collecting this year, that's going to be released in June 2022. So that's going to be something which is going to be looking forward to see updated information that's coming there. Or we can look in past ones. Now, we don't want to look about this particular one. What we may want to do is look at spit it out, Dante. The statistics is always a hard thing to say at the late time of the day, to see what are the particular things you want to look at. Now, if I want to look at the state of people, because they're the people buying things, and we'll look at people and communities, we can start to see some insights in migrants, gender indicators, so we can see specific things about, say, women, men, or generally all over. So we can look at stats as we go down there. Say, for instance, we're looking for people who want to quit smoking. So we can look at risk factors and service. So we look at smoking. We can start to look at the information that's in there. So we can see what the labor force participation is. And as we go further in that report, we can then see more information about, say, smoking, as a percentage of people who work. So you look at these data, we go further down, they've got, okay, here you go, like attainment of year 12. So if you want to know whether there was an increasing amount of people when it comes to education, where there's more people now who are getting their year 12 certificate than what there was who are in, say, my age group of 45 to 49, the actual year 12 rate has gone up significantly from 72% of women or females, and now we're looking at 88.9%. So more women are starting to get that. So you go, our actual female population in Australia is getting stronger and far more educated. And we can go further down and see a lot of that information in there. What we might want to do then is to see some kind of information on, say, work and family balance. So if we wanted to understand whether there's a trend in Australia that's allowing us to feel like there's some, I guess, some ideas we can glean from whether more people are volunteering, whether there's a good general satisfaction level. So this is really interesting. In 2019, we had some very strong satisfaction levels when it came to people in Australia. But you may say, actually, I'm working in a fitness and wellness and a lifestyle capacity with a product that I might want to match with the 32% or 31.5% of people who are not happy, or 22.5%, sorry. I'm not getting my maths right, am I? You can get a lot of information out of these particular reports, and I really encourage you to take a bit of a look through there and look at the kind of stuff that it really has pulled out. Some of the easiest stuff to pull out, though, is statistics on regions. And this is where it gets very, very good for starting to understand what the general censuses are for, or the general statistics are for people in your area. So if you find data for my area and you put in your name of your region, so let's just say we'll pick out Gladstone. Gladstone. Helps if I spell it right, huh? So Gladstone Park or Gladstone in Queensland. So we want Gladstone, which is the region. So it's going to show us that in its basics. I'll make this a bit bigger so you can read it. The median age is 36.4. Population of that, and the median wage being $56,707. Then we can then compare that. So say, for instance, if we were looking to open up a new business and we wanted to make sure people had quite a high wage level before we brought in our fancy schmancy service that we want to operate there, we can compare, say, the Gladstone region of 56,707 with Bundaberg, which is 39,090. So we look at that and go, the Bundaberg region, probably not a great place to start that business. Gladstone looking good because we're looking at a population that's largely influenced by mining exports, gas extraction as well. And they've got quite a large port in Gladstone that allows them to export a lot of liquid natural gas. Rockhampton, we can say 50,202, a little bit lower than Gladstone because it's less exposed to resources than what Gladstone is, but it does still have a strong beef cattle industry, and it also has a very strong government presence as well, so higher ranking government people. As we move out to, say, places like this, that's a very low area. In the Emerald Central Highlands, 53, a little higher because, they pay you a lot more to live there. And there's a lot of mining operations in that particular area. And as we get down to places like the Banana region, again, starting to drop down a little lower again, or if you go into North Burnett, even lower again. So you start to understand, and then just move down closer to Brisbane, that starts to get lower again. So like 21,249 in Cherbourg. And in the South Burnett, it's 42. So we're starting to see really big drops, even 38,993 in the Noosa area because there's a lot of retirees there. So there's not as much money to go around. But if we go into the general Sunshine Coast, it's a little bit higher at 43,467. So you can sort of look at these areas and combine them to think, well, here's some decisions I can make about where I might want to locate my business. Same thing, you go anywhere in Australia, hover over it and give you that very basic information. Bendigo or Ballarat, let's see, Bendigo 45,515 or Ballarat 46. So you can make a decision and say that there's a little bit more disposable income that might be available in somewhere like Ballarat. But if we look at where the age is higher, Ballarat's also a younger population, slightly younger, probably slightly more willing to spend money on new things that they don't really know. So as we go out on those, we can reset the map and then start to search for specific areas again. Now they've highlighted the main capital city areas, so you can just hover over those. So in Darwin, for instance, a very high median wage, much higher than most of those areas in Queensland. It goes down quite a lot. Sydney is around about the same, 52, 50. Actually, it's way higher in Darwin. We've got higher pay here. Someone forgot to tell me about that. In fact, we've got the highest pay in Australia. That's crazy. What's going on? And Canberra, look at them, 64. So actually a little bit more in Canberra. So Canberra, the highest paid city in Australia. Makes sense, doesn't it? Where all the politicians are. These kind of pieces of information, they may seem like quite disparate. So they might seem like they're not really relevant to you. But when you start to make decisions about where to host your different business ideas, that's when you go, that's the place where I want to go. That's the place where I want to try out. That could be the place where I go to expand into next. So once we look at that data, we know what we're doing, then we can go into all sorts of other statistics within here. So as we saw, the key economic indicators are another thing that may give you an idea about the kind of things that are happening at a much, much broader level across the country. Though, when we're really looking at what we want to do, that data by region is going to be the most common one you're going to find. That's going to be where you find most of the information, say, for instance, your postcode. Let's just say your postcode is 4208, so it's around about the Ormo area in southeast Queensland. Once I bring that up, any moment now, let's search. Here we go. Might have to search for the name. Doesn't look like it wants to do the ORMEAU. There you go, Ormo Hills. So we go there, we can find out a bit more about that specific area. So as we're getting closer, it's around about there. We can start to see, okay, that's in the Gold Coast area. So you can see what that more information is. And as we draw more out of it, we can look at more data and see deeper into that. So we can start to see where the income is, where the main employing industry, which is not tourism, funnily enough, it's actually healthcare and social assistance. So a lot of people working in aged care facilities and healthcare facilities. Looking at the unemployment rate, currently it's 6.9%. So you can start to see like which areas based on the average household size, because you look at 2.6 people per household, that's not a hugely family oriented area. Whereas if I was to go more out to Bow Desert, for instance, and change the scenic rim, that may change slightly. So I go and see the average average household size, no, about the same, 2.6. I was expecting the country to have more kids, a little bit less to do out there, hey? That can give you information about whether you think that this is a great place to open a business that's generally oriented to families as opposed to oriented to singles and that. But if you go in the closer areas to Brisbane, so some of those much closer areas such as, well, let's pop in and see what it looks like. Let's go into Brisbane. So the average household size is probably going to be around about the same, that 2.6. But it's that's a general Brisbane and general Queensland number. We can actually break this down to individual suburbs as well. If you go deeper, you can find a lot more detail in each suburb. So I go to Queensland, it gives me the overall, but I can then go and narrow that down to much smaller places and look at things like people born overseas. Gives me an idea in Queensland overall, how many people were born overseas and how that changed over the last, between 2011 and 2016, so a 5-year period. We actually saw less babies born overseas coming to Australia, but we might see that as we get older, there was a lot more people who were born overseas than what they were in 2011 as they've jumped into that age group. Now, Maggie's just asking now in the questions, my area is 5 years old in the ABS, how do I get more up to date? Yes, there is a new census this year. So they've just said that the information will come from this year's census, will come about in early 2022. So we'll have the new information about then. That said though, a lot of this information doesn't change dramatically in terms of, demographics or the kind of industries that go on, unless you're aware of a very large change that's happened in the demographic. If a new mine opened in your backyard, for instance, there might be a few more people working in mining than what there was before. But generally those numbers don't change drastically, but it does feel good to get some more up-to-date information from there. So the ABS is a really good, solid place to get some information from when you're trying to find, I guess, a little bit more out about the kind of markets you may want to move into. But then Google Ads is a great place for us to go and look at info as well. Now, this is more about intention, the kind of things that people are searching for and the things that people are interested in. So if we look to narrow down our market, we can look as close as a city, a state, a territory, a country. Sometimes you can't do it necessarily by suburb. I know that when we do it in Darwin, it's a little difficult to separate between Darwin and the satellite city of Palmerston. But you may very easily be able to do that in Brisbane, where you can separate Brisbane out from Redlands, out from Logan, out from Ipswich, out from Pine Rivers, or Moreton Bay Council area. You can find out how much it costs to advertise in your target area through Google. That's probably the primary reason why it's there, although this is not what we're using it for. But this is what I like. We can see what people are searching for. When they're searching for businesses specifically like yours, we can get an idea of whether that search is declining or rising, or whether there's a lot of competition for advertisers who are looking to advertise in that particular thing in your area. So for instance, you're opening up a Something to do with a Reiki practitioner, okay? Someone who's doing energy healing. So if that person's doing energy healing, they want to see if there's other people doing that, so that when you type into Google, energy healing in Helensvale, energy healing in Mount Lawley, you'll be able to see straight off the bat whether that is something which has people competing for those terms, or whether no one is, and you've got free reign and you can buy your way in for $1 a click and not have to worry about having to compete against other people too much. The other part of Google Ads is that we can look at their trends. So in Google, so it allows us to compare within the market, say the city, the state, the territory, country, same stuff, see what buyers are generally interested in and compare things. So you can track interest in certain products, in certain services, certain destinations. Some of the examples on the screen here for pho, ramen, and soba as different things that people are interested in. As pho is sort of climbed up, it's really ramen that seems to have had the massive increase, which is basically like 2-minute noodles. I don't know why they have to, what's such a big thing in America. It's like they've only just discovered it. And then we look at things like cupcakes, as opposed to people who are playing Fortnite, the game. So we'll have a look at some of these tools as well, so we get an idea of it. But basically, how would you apply this data? Let's look at Twan again. Food truck owner, Gold Coast. Remember the guy? He wants to ask whether he should expand his business into a physical restaurant on the Gold Coast. In this case, what he can look for is overall interest within the Gold Coast in what he sells. So if he's selling pho or banh mi or maybe Vietnamese coffee, then he will look for the interest in those areas and whether there's been a declining or an increasing interest in those as become more known. Carolyn will do the same. She'll go look at the Darwin data and see if there's more inquiries about things like handmade clothing or clothing that's made consciously, so sustainable fabrics and that sort of thing. Ambrose will look at that to see if there's a lot of searches going on the property development, commercial property development, commercial property, available industrial space, available office space, to see whether it's worth investing in building new buildings for his business, and whether he could go, okay, I can start selling things into that area because I know that there's a growing interest in those things happening. Before we jump into LinkedIn, let's get out of that share again, and I'll open up a new window. And this time we're going to look at the stuff we can find in the Google Ads system. So I'll just quickly share my screen again, and we'll start getting into that. So we were playing with the Australian Bureau of Statistics. What I'm going to do now is hop into an ads account on Google that I no longer use, and we'll start to see whether there's some information we can glean out of this. So let's just get started because I've already got an account. Should log me in. We're getting there. Come on. Here we go. So the settings that they use in the Google Ads system is under Tools and Settings. And then we're looking for the Keyword Planner. So in the Keyword Planner, we get this interface. It's going to ask us a little bit of information about what we are actually looking for. So if I wanted to get a bit of a volume of searches and forecasts, I can look into that and go, I'm looking for the keywords, say, for instance, let's say for Twan, he's looking for Vietnamese food, Gold Coast. That's a pretty, or Vietnamese restaurant. We'll try that because that's what he wants to open up. We're going to see what the forecasts are and what the trends are around that particular kind of stuff. So what it's saying is that there's not really a lot going on. There's not a huge amount of searches going on for that really in Australia at the moment. One of my favorite places to look for is in the other part of the keyword planner, which is this discover new keywords. This gives me a bit deeper a look. So I can, for instance, take Vietnamese restaurant in Gold Coast. Make sure I've spelled all that correctly. Yes, I have. And then get the results. And it's going to give me a whole bunch of other ideas for searches. Now, this one's not working very well at all. Let me just go down and make it a bit more specific to Gold Coast. Target there. Save. And then look for Vietnamese restaurant. Let's get our results again. So the searches for Vietnamese restaurant on the Gold Coast This is not right because it usually would give me at least some idea of what I'm looking for. But if we look for maybe, let's say, women's shoes, if that's something you're selling, it'll give us a bit more information and a bit more data. So we start to see that there is quite a lot of searching, between 100 and 1,000 searches per day on the Gold Coast for women's shoes. And it's fairly competitive by advertisers. So it gives me an idea that somebody is advertising for these things like women's shoes, or ideas around women's sneakers, UGG slippers. These are all things that have got a fair few little per click payments that people are willing to put in there. So what we're seeing is that it's not, there is high competition for it, but there's very low amount of money they're willing to spend on a per click basis for it, which tells us that we have got some competition of people who are advertising in the Gold Coast women's shoes. So there's a very good chance that there's people who are advertising in that very specific area about that. So the market research we're getting out of this is, yes, there is competition. Yes, there's still quite a lot of searching per day going for those particular searches. If we're looking for espadrilles as a kind of shoe, then we know there's between 100 and 1,000 searches per month, and that somebody is actually advertising against that and charging, they're paying anywhere between 36 cents and 78 cents per click to get through to their particular search result. I look at that as high competition. I think it's more that per shoe, they're not willing to spend very much per click. That's why it's a little bit lower. So if you were to say spend, this will give you a bit of market research on how much it's going to cost us to advertise, say, espadrilles as a kind of shoe to people in the Gold Coast, then we know that if we spent 78 cents, we're going to be at the top of the search results. 36 cents will sometimes be in the top, but not always. But if we'll spend 83 cents, we'll definitely be on those search results until someone else decides to spend a little bit more on that as well. So that's an idea of Google's keyword planner to give you an idea. We can also try Google Trends. In Google Trends, we see some really interesting searches, and they even give you a few that are very cool as an example. So they start with an example like, the interest in America between Taylor Swift and Kim Kardashian. At the moment, Taylor Swift is killing it. So pretty much everything's purple, like Taylor Swift's result is. And the interest in region for, say, the World Cup, football or American football, we see football, which is some soccer, is represented very heavily in the very non-conservative areas, like such as New England and California, whereas American football is what's covered pretty much in the Midwest, the South, and throughout the areas that are not quite so Hispanic. You might find also Florida might have a fair bit of that going on down there. But what we want to do is search for interest in Vietnamese cuisine. So Vietnamese cuisine, we can start to see over the United States. I want to change that to, it doesn't do like areas, it really only does countries, but at least gives us a pretty good idea, because there we can look for Australia, maybe Queensland. Yep, there we go, Queensland. Over the past 12 months, Vietnamese food has been up and down like a yo-yo. So it's not being something which is very huge in terms of its daily searches. It has crashed and gone up and down, but we can then compare that with, say, Thai cuisine. So we go a particular restaurant, let's say Thai cuisine, and then we could do a search between Vietnamese and Thai. Now, no one's searching for Thai cuisine, so we're going to change this from Vietnamese cuisine to Vietnamese food and Thai food. And once we start to see that, we see that Thai is killing Vietnamese. And we add in something like Mexican, and within Queensland, the search between Mexican food, Thai food. So Mexican competes a bit better with Thai, but really Thai food, it seems to be the thing that everyone's searching for, and no one would be really surprised with that. So we get an idea that there's a lot more interest in Thai food than Mexican, or there is in Vietnamese food. But that will tell us as well that there's probably, because there's a lot more Thai places around, and take a look around anywhere in Queensland, anywhere in Australia really, and you'll know there's so many Thai restaurants. Every corner has a Thai restaurant. But I then add in Indian food, that may throw things about a bit. Suddenly it's not so clear. The Indian food, being the green, is competing very strongly with Mexican food, but not quite as strongly against Thai food. So this is only between February 16 last year and now. So we're getting an idea that some things then here, by going there, are on the rise. Some things are falling. Vietnamese food is on the down. Mexican food's definitely on the down. Like, it's really not as popular, although slight rise in the last month. And we find that Vietnamese food and Indian food are on the rise again. Sorry, Thai food and Indian food are both on the rise quite significantly. That's a big jump in the last month. So we're starting to see that if we wanted to look at trends that are going on in food consumption across Queensland as a state, we're starting to see that. If we swap that out for, say, Northern Territory, we start to see that Mexican food hardly rates a mention at all. Indian food and Thai food are pretty much the only two things getting searched. There's not even a mention of Vietnamese food in there specifically. But remember, Northern Territory, tiny population. If we move into, say, Western Australia, we start to see some better numbers again. What you'll see here is that Indian is competing much more strongly against Thai in Western Australia. That will tell you that there's probably a huge Indian restaurant presence in Western Australia, particularly in Perth, which is influencing that. So you do get changes as you move across the country. South Australia, it's actually more, Thai is really not the winner here overall. You think the winner is actually probably Indian food. So South Australians seem to be a bit more into Indian food than Thai food. So you can start to extrapolate some sort of terms there to say, okay, I'm understanding what these sort of places look like. Some places have big enough data to pull those out. So Queensland may have enough data to split that into cities. So they're just looking at Brisbane at the moment, where it's very much about Thai food and Indian food, whereas Vietnamese and Mexican barely rate any search volume. Or we can compare that, say, in a bigger population place like New South Wales, where you might be able to separate again. It's Thai food, really big in Sydney. Then in Victoria, isn't it fun looking through all these trends and looking at what's different about different places around Australia? In Victoria, it's very much Indian food is a bit more dominant than the other two. So Indian food and Thai food again, but we just like our Thai food in Australia. We really, really seem to like it, and it doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem to be ebbing away at all. So we look at that and go, well, there's still a strong market for Thai food in where we're going. Let's go back into somewhere like Western Australia. There's still a strong market for Thai food. In Western Australia, it is trending back up again. Indian food is also trending up again. So we know that there's something about that, but Vietnamese food is really flatlined when it comes to interest in it. Same with Mexican food, although it's starting to go back up a little bit now. But in reality, it's all Thai and Indian, especially Indian. Indian is really on fire at the moment in Western Australia. There's a lot of attention on that food. So we can go, if there's this increased presence of this, there's probably a good chance that you can open up an Indian restaurant in just about any single place in Perth, and you're probably going to make money right now. So we wipe all those out and we can look at all sorts of other little things. So we can look at other terms such as essential oils. We can then compare that with Reiki. We can compare that with chiropractor. And see what the sort of interests are in. So if we look at chiropractor, there's not a huge amount of search volume going on for chiropractors at the moment, not like there is with Reiki. That's really interesting. So if you're thinking of opening up a wellness practice, right now there's a lot of people searching for Reiki as in comparison to, say, a chiropractor. But even more than that is essential oils. There's a massive search volume going on. And whilst it dips and does rise and all that, it does seem like there's a pretty stable level of interest in essential oils. More essential oils than Reiki and a chiropractor. Now, some of this might be essential oils are cheaper than a Reiki practitioner. A Reiki practitioner is cheaper than a chiropractor. So that may be some of what it is. That's in America. If we break that down to Australia, we might see a different set of trends. So Australia, we see that it's chiropractor, again, is just not a hugely searched for term. Again, though, we're seeing a very similar breakdown, Reiki and then essential oils. But I think the gap between Reiki and essential oils is actually a little bit bigger. We're both seeing both of them taking a dive lately. And same with chiropractors. There hasn't been a big lot of search going on in interest in general over time with chiropractors. So that's why you probably see a lot more energy healers around than chiropractors right now. If you're looking to open up that wellness salon, then you would say, well, we definitely have to include some essential oils in there because interest remains strong. Even though it's trending down over the last 12 months, it's still fairly strong and certainly stronger than having a chiropractor in there. So that can be really interesting for you to look at that to see it's much the same from state to state. Not a lot of difference there, really. And we continue to go on. Northern Territory, it's all pretty much essential oils everywhere. Essential oils are absolutely smashing everything else. So you can compare those, or you can take a comparison, which is more down to the fact of doing whatever the particular sub area of business that you're going to do. Google Trends can certainly find you a lot more information to give you a bit more, I guess, to work with that will help you make better decisions about the kind of things you're going to do. So back to our presentation, you can also look at information coming in from LinkedIn. And from LinkedIn, we're looking at information about stuff that we can narrow down to our city, our state, territories, countries, that sort of thing. We know that. We can look at how much it costs to advertise, much the same way we can do in Facebook and in Google as well. And we can look at job roles and interests and see what kinds of people are in what kinds of places and what their intentions are when it comes to moving around. Now, this could be very useful if you're a recruiter, if you're a property developer, a property agent, sorry, like a real estate agent or a property manager, where you want to see if there's people coming into that area en masse who may be interested in renting houses, or may be interested in buying furniture, or might be interested in having a decorator come in and paint the place. So that can give you that sort of information. Why will we pay for this kind of, or not pay for it, but how will we apply this data? Well, with Twan, again, our Gold Coast food truck owner, he would look at that and say, well, there's a whole lot of very upscale people moving into the Southport area due to the health precinct and the university. Therefore, opening up a restaurant makes sense in that area because I've got a new higher level of people who are willing to spend more. Carolyn in Darwin, she may go, actually, you know what? If I go into the city, it's probably a good place to go because it's a little bit cheaper. And I know that a lot of government workers are in the city, and government workers, by and large, have a slightly higher, disposable income, and might be more willing to wear handcrafted clothing. And Ambrose, he knows that there's a whole lot of building going on in, let's pick a city, it's got a lot of building, probably Perth's got a lot of building on still right now, I think. So we'll look at Perth is a great place to go to look at construction, because he's found there's actually a massive increase in the amount of contractors and geospatial engineers that are in the Perth area who may be looking to, it's an indication that there's a big of a rise in construction going on there. So if he can see those trends emerging through LinkedIn, he can then start to get some good information about what it is that he's selling towards. So before we go to Facebook, I'm going to pull up some data from LinkedIn. So I'm going to go into LinkedIn, my LinkedIn account, to be able to see my LinkedIn profile and feed. All right, so once we go in here, what we want to do is go into work. And we're going into so we can go into insights, which is a bit of general information about trends and stuff. So you can look at talent insights. That's more to do with if you're looking at hiring people. We're not looking to do that. What we want to do is look at marketing solutions. So marketing solutions is all about their ads platform, and it opens up a lot of information just the same way that the Google Ads platform does. So once we're in here, we can look at things like creating an ad. So you don't have to have set up your ads account yet. I've got a few ads that are running here in the past. So I can go, I've got an account here. I'm going to go say in the Clickstarter Australia one. And I'm going to look at starting to do a pretend campaign. So I'm going to go, okay, here's my campaign groups I've already got. I can look at demographics and performance of those ads campaigns. What I'm doing, create a campaign group and call it, let's call it stats. I'm going to run it for a certain amount of time. So what you're trying to do is just fake the fact that you're going to do some kind of ads campaign with them. And save that and run it continuously. Now, once I've done that, I'm going into my stats group and I'm now going to create a campaign. Again, we're faking creating a campaign. We're not actually going to make one. So we can say, okay, this is our campaign. I've got this information about it so far. What I want to do is go next and start saying, what do I want to achieve in this? Now, I might okay, just some brand awareness will do just for the sake of it. Now, within Australia, it's telling us that we can reach 12 million people, which it seems quite a ridiculous amount of people through LinkedIn. In Australia, that's probably not that accurate. What we can do is start to go, where are the locations in Australia we want to target? Now, remember, what this is us trying to find out information about the kind of people and what they're doing and in that particular audience. So I can use LinkedIn audiences, which means I can look for people within a certain area with all these things. Event planners, financial advisors. Now, this starts to be stuff which you're selling business to business. This is great information to get. So let's get out of Australia and let's just get into a particular area. Let's call it Perth. Perth, Western Australia, Greater Perth area. That sounds about right. Okay. So it's telling us that 890,000 people within the Perth region apparently are connected to or will have some connection to within the next 30 days with LinkedIn. Again, to me, it seems like a lot of people. I don't think there's that many people on LinkedIn in Perth, but you never know. So I'll go with that. What I'm looking for is one of my audiences. I'm looking for people who have some sort of expertise in Bitcoin and blockchain because I'm selling them something to do with Bitcoin or blockchain. By selecting all this, it's going to take us out of the area of just Perth because there's not enough of them and just gives us Australia. Now I can now narrow that back down again to Perth. And I just want to look for people with Bitcoin or Bitcoin or cyber currency expertise that are in the Perth region. And I'm looking at 1,200 people. Now, what you would want to do is only advertise those 1,200 people. If you're really specifically looking at people, you've got a product to do with Bitcoin and blockchain, and you want to be able to send them a message that's very specific to sell them. You then also happen to know now in your market research, without sending any ads, that there are 1,200 people at least in Perth who are working in the area of Bitcoin and blockchain, or at least have an interest in it. So that tells me that, okay, if there's 1,200 in Perth, let's go to another city. Let's just say, let's go for something a bit bigger. Let's go for Sydney. So in Sydney, in the Greater Sydney area, we're now looking at 12,000. So they've gone up significantly. 1,200 in Perth area, 12,000 in Sydney. So you're seeing that there's a lot stronger interest through LinkedIn in Bitcoin and blockchain in Sydney than what there is in Perth. Even though Sydney is 5 times the size, the audience size is actually 10 times the size, which tells us far more people in Sydney are, as a proportion, are interested in this particular topic. Now, that might not be the audience we really want. We may want to find another audience altogether. So we see all the audiences and we start to go, okay, we can make a template. So these are the ones they've already got that you can look through. I can look at my saved ones. What I want to do is create a brand new audience. So let's clear it out and look for someone again in Perth. And we can start to get some ideas of the interests they have to see if there's interest in the particular thing we do. I don't want this blockchain audience. I want to clear that out. I want to create something new. So I want to clear that. I might just have to completely clear that out because it won't let me actually change it. Let's change the entire campaign to website visits just to reset it. Thank you. That's what I want. Perth, Western Australia. I'm not looking for a particular interest in that stuff. What I can look at though is the breakdown in industries. So if I want to see, there's enough people within Perth who work in, say, internet related stuff. So I can get rid of all these others: banking, insurance, financial, all that. Don't want any of that. Don't want any of that. All that. Computer software, maybe information technology, internet, computer. Yep, all the computer related stuff. So in Perth, people who are in that target number to about 710 people. So just in Perth, who are people who are likely to click on links, who are interested in those areas. We now know that there's that size of people available in there. If I want to compare that to go, well, should I spend my money in Perth, 710, or let's say Brisbane? Brisbane's a little bit bigger. It's quite a bit bigger in terms of the size. So you would actually look at that proportion and say Brisbane about 2 million, Perth about 1.7 million people in it. You compare the two and you go, well, that's actually a bigger proportion, 1,100 to, I guess, compared to 710. So there's probably a bit more interest in these particular industries that we were selecting before. Down here, computer software, internet, all that sort of stuff. The kind of groups that they may be part of, there's a lot of them. And then we know that there's a bigger interest in Brisbane than what there is in Perth. Now, again, how would you apply this? You would look at this and go, well, I've got a certain amount of people in one city over the other. You may say, I will now do ads that target to people in Brisbane rather than Perth because there seems to be more of them. Or it may be to do with starting a business or changing a business. If you wanted to diversify your business and go out to, okay, instead of going out to going into retail storefronts, you might look at people reaching people who are nerdy, software developers, internet people, tend to be kind of nerdy. I'm going to open up a Comic-Con store or a cosplay store or a gaming store in Brisbane as the other part, instead of Perth, because there seems to be a higher level of interest in Brisbane than what there is in Perth. Or you can then start to compare them. So we've got 1,100 there. You may go, there's actually a lot more in maybe Sydney again, where that suddenly goes up to 5,800 people who are in those kind of target areas in those particular industries and have that kind of attribute. And then could be part of any of those groups. We can start to say, okay, Sydney's got a big level, but there's also a lot more competition in the bigger cities as well. We compare Sydney to Melbourne. So when you're trying to compare apples with apples here, so you want to compare cities that are relatively recent, relatively comparable size. So Perth and Brisbane, similar size. Melbourne and Sydney, similar size. But what we did notice when it comes to IT, 3,900 in Melbourne, right? But in Sydney, a similar size city, only about 250,000 more people, significantly larger target audience size for IT. That's because Sydney is an IT centre, whereas Melbourne's not quite an IT centre. More financial centre in Melbourne and more of a technology centre in Sydney. So we know that, okay, if we would choose between the two to go in for a new business, we'd probably go to Sydney because there's a lot more nerds in Sydney than there is in Melbourne. So that's a really general way of looking at it. These are the kind of things you can start to glean from the data that you're getting out of LinkedIn. Now, do I use this as a major source of my data? Probably not. I tend to use a lot more data coming out of Facebook than out of LinkedIn. And I've got reasons for that because Facebook is more a representation of what we're looking to do when we're targeting businesses selling to, or we're targeting people rather than businesses. If I was targeting businesses or targeting upon the attributes of what I was trying to find out from someone who is very, very closely related to a workplace, or I wanted to get someone who's very much into their kind of career or their job, then LinkedIn's quite good for that. But when it comes to Facebook, we get a lot more deep dive into the kind of motivations that people have through their ads platform. Again, we can narrow down city, state, territory, country. Again, we can use it to advertise against the target market. But what we now start to see is more about what people like, more about what their lifestyles are like, more about the people they are at home and the people they are at work. And of course, how that may differ a little bit too. So in Facebook, if we were looking at Tuan again, if he wants to expand his business into a physical restaurant, we can actually start to see if there's interest and how much behavioral interest there is in the Facebook family of apps in Vietnamese food. In Carolyn's case, we can look at the interest in Darwin for fashion and organic fibers. We can look at Ambrose, we can look at the interest in the construction industry in general and how many people seem to have listed themselves or show a behavior that indicates they're part of that. So what we're going to do is pull out Facebook now. So I just turned off the wrong screen there. And we'll open up our Facebook ads platform. I'm going to open up the one that I've been banned on. So we're going to see some interesting stuff. I'll just wait until that opens properly. Let's go into my ads platform. And I'll share my screen again. Okay, so in this ads platform, so this is the ads manager. I'm going to hop out of here and I'm going to go to a thing called Audience Insights. So what I'm going to do is go to business.facebook.com. If you've got a Facebook page, a business page, you will have access to this. In here, I'm going to go to a thing called Audience Insights. So what I need to go is probably go to Audiences. Takes me back into the ads manager, which I cannot do because I have banned. And up in the little right-hand corner with the 9 little dots, I'm going to go down and I'm in audiences now. What I can now start to do is look at, I'm in the wrong section of Facebook altogether. That's why it wasn't working for me. Let's go Audience Insights on Google. That'll tell us where it is. Facebook Audience Insights. Here's the link. Now I've got it. I was just in here the other day. So it lets us know in this Facebook for Business website, I can start to look for information about Audience Insights. So in here in Facebook, for we've got Audience Insights page. And then that starts linking us into, so if you go to this particular address up here, facebook.com/business, not business.facebook.com, you get then into there. So I'm going to take you where you really should have gone to, which is facebook.com/business. Sorry, I got the particular address wrong. It gives a whole lot of different information on how to use the Facebook platform to grow your business. What we're really looking for is resources, solutions, that kind of stuff. And we're looking for insights. So what I'm looking for, this is a brand new layout for this. So they've actually updated this and made it really hard for me to find things I normally find. Insights. Don't you hate it when they've changed things halfway on you before your last time here? So we go to insights. And we can start to see as advertising insights to tell us stories about it. I'm again not in the right place. They've really changed this on me. I'm just going to have to go to Google again. Audience Insights, Facebook. Sorry about this. It's all changed since I last looked at it. Back into Audience Insights. So if you just Google Audience Insights Facebook, it'll take you right there. Go to Audience Insights. And then in here, I can then choose whether I want to search people connected to my page or everyone on Facebook. For the sake of market research, we're going to look at everyone on Facebook. This gives me the United States because the world is revolving around America. So let's just say Australia, kick out the United States, just Australian data. This is now giving me aggregated data about the use of Facebook in Australia. So it's telling me that there's between 15 and 20 million people per month will be using it, depending on sometimes there's bigger, sometimes there's less. We can see that there's 53% women, 47% men, which tells us immediately it's definitely a more women-oriented platform. What we can now start to see is the breakdown into things like demographics. I'm going to make my screen a bit bigger so you can actually read this stuff. So we go to people between, say, the age of 25 and 39. Let's go specifically for women between 25 and 39. And we start to see a little bit more about them. We start to see their relationship is not quite 50% married, but we've seen they're single and in a relationship, and there's been a high number of change to engage. So what it's saying is 51% in this group compared to Facebook users. So there's a lot of people more engaged in general than what there was before. I think that might have something to do with Valentine's Day yesterday. A lot of statuses changing to engaged. I think I saw about 20 different ones in my Facebook feed. We can see that women in this age group are particularly high level of university education, very encouraging. And there's 9% are also postgraduate. Now, what this tells us that this particular demographic is much more likely to be a postgraduate university graduate than the average Facebook user. This one here was telling us that in this particular demographic of women between 25 and 39, that they're far higher likely to be engaged than people generally in the rest of Facebook. So that's all very interesting. What can I do with this? Well, I can start to break this down into women between 25 and 39 in Australia and start to see their interests. Now, their interests might be, if I'm selling essential oils, essential oil, I can now see there's around 450 to 500,000 women between 25 and 39, it's that number there, who have an interest in essential oils in Australia. That's a very valuable figure. That's telling me that out of the total of that area, so let's take the essential oil interest out, 2.5 to 3 million people, at least 500,000 of those, nearly 500,000, have an interest in essential oils specifically. That is a very high percentage of a demographic to be interested in a very specific product. That is why you see essential oils everywhere. Network marketing schemes like doTERRA, everywhere. Young Living essential oils, absolutely everywhere. It's a very lucrative business when it comes to this particular demographic. Now we can start to see across Australia where the strongest places are for people who are interested, and where the strongest movement, has been in interest in essential oils in Australia. If you're selling doTERRA essential oils, these are the areas you need to start focusing on, because there's been at least some move on the dial in interest in these particular areas. 100% more interest compared to the rest of Facebook area in this particular demographic for Albury, New South Wales. So that's somewhere you might want to consider when you're looking to expand your essential oils network or your essential oils empire. These are particular places where you're much more higher likely to come across people that are interested in essential oils than other demographics on Facebook. You can also see the language they speak. It's going to be largely English, but we can start to see that there's a higher percentage of Vietnamese speakers than other foreign languages when it comes to interest within this demographic for essential oils. That's telling you that there's something going on in the Vietnamese community that stands above Spanish speakers, French speakers, Japanese speakers, Chinese speakers, Portuguese speakers. It really stands out quite significantly above them for this demographic for interest in essential oils. These are valuable insights that tell you, that's what I need to be aiming at. There's something going on in that community that tells me that I must get in there too. Or if I know someone who's Vietnamese, get them on board, because the Vietnamese community right now seem to be going nuts for essential oils. Isn't this fascinating? You can start to make some really strong business decisions based on what you're trying to do with, all sorts of stuff. So if you wanted to increase where you're sending out your particular product to, this is a chance to do that. If you wanted to increase the amount of sales you're making, you can do that. Now, the audience insights are endless. You can go on forever. It's a big rabbit hole. But what I do want to tell you, though, is when it comes to going into data, that you go into your data with an open mind. Don't go in trying to prove a theory. Go in and try and disprove a theory. If someone tells you, oh my God, all my Italian friends are absolutely into essential oils right now, look for the data that will disprove it, and you'll find the data that either backs it up or doesn't. Look for patterns. So I look for a pattern there. I was looking for some piece of information that would give me a direction to go in with essential oils within a female demographic of 25 to 39. And it just so happens I decided that Vietnamese people seem to be the most significant language speaking group within Australia outside English for interest in that demographic for essential oils. Utterly unexpected to find it. And all that when I was talking about Vietnamese food earlier on. There you go. They might not be, we might not be interested in their food right now, but they are certainly interested in essential oils. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what sort of approaches you can take to getting some market research out of these digital tools, you can get hold of me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or through this particular email address, dante@treaty.com.au. I hope you've really enjoyed some of this. I know we've gone a little bit off track sometimes and found some really interesting rabbit holes to go down, but that's data. It's really interesting to see just what information you can get out of there. So first up, number one, pick out what you want to find out. Number two, don't get too stuck on a result. Look to try and disprove a theory. Number three, use as many sources as you can to find information on what you want to do with your business or any changes you want to make. Thank you so much. Have a great week. And I'm Dante St James. I'll see you again soon.